website.com. Today we're going to be going over the Sicilian defense for black, and it starts out pawn to e4 and black responds pawn to c5. Now this is actually the most common defense for black to the e4 opening for white, and it's actually the best scoring, and most statistics actually prefer d4 as an opening for white on the first move only because of how well this Sicilian defense plays against e4. Even a top level play, this is going to be the most widely used defense for black, and so you definitely want to know for your own game how to play it, and some of the key concepts that you should always keep in the back of your mind when you are playing it. So we're going to go ahead and look at a few of the lines. Future videos will go a little more in depth into the different variations that you can get into from the main line, but today we're going to kind of touch on the key points of the opening and how it looks. So white usually continues knight to f3, basically trying to gain control of the e5 and the d4 square. Obviously at the beginning of the game both sides are trying to gain center control. Black is taking away this d4 thrust that white would eventually like to play. Black now is going to respond with pawn to d6. Now this does a couple things. First thing it does protect his pawn on c5. And the second thing it does, white eventually would like to continue just moving up his pawn down the food chain to pawn to e5, and so this is stopping that attack. So a very good move. He's got a nice little pawn structure. Keep in mind though that his bishop on f8 is not going anywhere anytime soon. He is blocked by 3 pawns. Eventually though, you're going to want to move this pawn either to e6 or e5. You're eventually going to want to get your bishop to e7 unless you play the dragon and you fianchetto. Once your bishop is on e7, you can then castle once the knight is developed, and you will have very good development on the king side. So that's how eventually you're going to play with this bishop. Your bishop here on the c8 square, you're eventually going to want to thrust this pawn on the b file, and you're going to want to get the bishop on this long diagonal aimed right at the king side. So a few key concepts to look at the very beginning. We're going to continue forward with the main line. White thrust forward, trying to gain center control with pawn to d4, and black here is just going to capture this with pawn takes d4. Obviously black wants to take away center control. White now has 2 options. He can take with the knight, take with the queen. Obviously you don't want to take with the queen early on with white, just because you don't want to get your queen involved too early, and if you do take, black can always develop his knight here with c6, and black will have to retreat his queen, losing a tempo. So more than likely you will see knight captures d4. Again, these moves that I'm saying should not be done. If they are done by your opponent, you should definitely take advantage of those moves and exploit your mistakes by your opponents. So from here, black usually continues with knight to f6, basically putting pressure on this e4 square, trying to put more pressure on the center. White now has to respond to defend this. The best way to do that is the main line, which is just simply knight to c3. And now there are 3 very good variations that we're going to touch on. In later videos we will go a little more in depth. The first one is the Nassdorf, which is just pawn to a6, and this is actually a very aggressive move. White can no longer come with his bishop and attack the king. Eventually you can thrust forward with this pawn to b5. It has a defender from the a6 square. Your bishop can come on this long diagonal attack. So at the outset it doesn't look like it does much, but as the game goes forward, it's going to be a very good move as you try to attack the king side. The second move that we're going to look at is simply the classical variation, which is just a development of the knight here to c6. White can always capture here, and then black can take on c6 and begin to thrust forward again for center control. So that is the classical. And then last we have the dragon. A lot of times you will see people try to fianchetto on the king side. They'll bring their bishop to g7, castle king side, and build up a defense that way. So a lot of different variations that you can do. This is a very good defense. It's a very attacking defense. You can get a lot of good play from it. So those are some of the key concepts to keep in mind. Later videos we will go into some of the other variations.